That was Mia Shem, 21-year-old Israeli citizen whose video has become the face of this hostage crisis. At 5:30, I'm going to decode everything that particular video tells us, and also what Israel may be doing or not doing as far as rescuing those hostages is concerned. Thanks for joining me. It's day 11 of the Israel-Hamas war. I'm Shiv. These are the headlines. Israel Prime Minister Netanyahu vows total annihilation of Hamas once again. Israel's attack plan is out. He aims to give diplomacy a chance to recover all hostages safely. US President Biden to visit war-hit Israel tomorrow. Supreme Court refuses to recognize same-sex marriage and puts on the onus on Parliament, but top court recognizes right to union and live-in relationships for LGBTQ couples. Trouble mounts for Trinamool MP Mahua Maitra. Lok Sabha Speaker sends BJP MP's cash for query complaint against Mahua to the Ethics Committee of Parliament. Alia Bhatt and Kriti Sanon bagged the Best Actress Awards at the 69th National Film Awards. Pushpa star Allu Arjun wins Best Actor. Veteran Wahida Rehman honoured with the Dada Saheb Phalke Award.
बचपन से शुरू हुआ सफर जो प्यासा गाइड कागज आलिया भट्ट.
ISRO to hold Gaganyaan mission's test flight on October the 21st. Prime Minister Modi sets 2035 target to establish Indian space station. Eyes sending Indian astronaut to the moon in 2040. The most powerful man in the world lands in Israel tomorrow. President Joe Biden arrives in Tel Aviv at a time when Israel's tank regiments are massed along the Gaza frontier, primed and ready to roll in. When Biden lands nearly 2 weeks into a historic escalation between Hamas and Israel, he brings with him a handful of deep anxieties that I want to break down for you. Sections of the American media are describing Biden's dilemma as outrage without escalation. Think about that for a moment, viewer. Outrage without escalation. Biden was unequivocal, unambiguous about his solidarity with Israel from the start, clearly calling the October 7th attack an act of sheer evil, but also calling upon Israel now not to invade the Gaza Strip. You're wondering, why is he advising Israel so? Well, Biden's visit to Israel will be an incredibly delicate tightrope walk. As the President of the United States, he must come across as nothing but unambiguously supportive of Israel, empathetic to its anger, and understanding of how and why it is taking the steps it is now taking. At the same time, with a looming election in the United States next year, the Israel-Gaza conflict widening into more parts of the Middle East will mean the United States has no choice but to get embroiled, and that is a nightmare scenario. Which means Biden, whose re-election campaign uses his image as a reliable and experienced leader bringing stability to a world in chaos, will be a president whose nation has been drawn into 2 wars, in Ukraine first, and now the Middle East potentially. Already under pressure domestically for American resources in the Ukraine conflict, it is unlikely that the United States has the appetite for involvement in another big global conflagration. Therefore, President Biden's key priority when he lands in Israel tomorrow, I think, will be to ensure the Israel-Gaza war does not widen beyond Israel-Gaza. In Biden's view, an invasion will ensure that it will expand the war beyond Israel-Gaza. That's why he's advising Israel not to invade. Now, the bombing of Hamas positions in Gaza is also rapidly evolving, as you can see from picture after picture, into a humanitarian crisis. Galvanized by anger over continuing attacks by Hamas even now, and this escalating hostage crisis, with a video coming out of that first hostage, Biden walks a very difficult political tightrope where he cannot be seen to be advising restraint at a time when the Jewish state is at a historic emotional peak. But there are geopolitical pressures too on President Biden. A nightmare scenario, viewer, imagine, would be a regional conflict in the Middle East that draws in other countries, including Lebanon, Syria, Iran, and others. According to one of India's most foremost strategic thinkers, Brahma Chilani, for instance, a widening of this conflict would seriously undermine US interests because they would provide strategic space for Russia and China to come in and play their hand. Any void would be advantage Russia and China. And make no mistake, Biden's response to the Israel-Hamas crisis was the most visible from the get-go. It was on day one, remember itself, that he ordered America's largest warship, the USS Gerald R. Ford aircraft carrier battle group, into waters off the coast of Israel, where they arrived last week, as a show of support, solidarity, and to beef up intelligence assistance to the Israeli military. The irony is, Biden will actually be hoping against hope that weapons on board this battle group don't need to be used in this crisis. Because if they need to be used, it means the balloon has gone up and war has broken out. And that brings us back to the original dilemma of outrage without escalation. If President Biden doesn't want an invasion of Gaza, how does he expect Israel to expend its will for retribution against Hamas? And don't forget the spectacular geopolitical contradictions within this region itself, viewer. Let me simplify that for you. Qatar, which hosts the chairman of Hamas as a VIP guest, also houses one of the largest expeditionary US military central command bases in the world. Before the Hamas attack on Israel, Biden had been instrumental in unfreezing $6 billion to Iran, a nation that funds, trains, and arms the Hamas. For the United States and Biden, the October 7th Hamas terrorist strike has been a violent reboot. It has reset all equations. It has completely derailed several parallel America-led missions to bring some semblance of normalcy to frayed relations in the Middle East, while ensuring it does not squander its own power in this highly sensitive region. A very angry Israel that will likely trust nobody ever again in the region is now Biden's biggest dilemma. The world already has one big war on its hands in Ukraine. A second could plunge the world into a crisis that goes beyond just economic. Much of what happens next could be in the hands of the most powerful man in the world. President Joe Biden arrives in Israel tomorrow. So remember this, the dilemma and the absolute conundrum that stands before the most powerful man in the world, Joe Biden, who's on his way to Israel. He lands tomorrow. And a man who is perhaps the angriest world leader at this moment. Benjamin Netanyahu and President Biden will be meeting tomorrow, not for the first time. They've met several times before, including earlier this year in New York. But this time, there will have to be a meeting of minds. Both these leaders have spoken at least on 4 occasions since the Hamas terror attack on October the 7th. Solidarity has been expressed with Israel, but the dilemma now is for Netanyahu that his biggest ally, the source of huge numbers of Israeli funding, President Biden, the United States, that big nation, has asked Israel to exercise caution and not go in for a ground invasion of Israel. The tanks are already massed along the border with Gaza. The Israeli war machine is primed and ready for a ground invasion, and nobody knows how long that will actually last or what that endgame could actually be. But at this precise moment, the dilemma remains: will Israel roll in, or will they listen to President Biden? I'd like to show you what the world looks like right now in terms of who's supporting Israel and who's supporting the Palestinian side. Here are the countries that are currently solidly supporting Israel. India, and even though it has a nuanced stance, the United States, UK, France, Australia, Germany, UAE, Norway, and Canada. These are countries that support Israel, though, as I said, like UAE and India, there are nuanced stances. Both those countries also are in favor of a peaceful two-state solution. Here are the countries that are backing Hamas and Hamas terrorists: Qatar, Lebanon, Pakistan, which has hilariously sent humanitarian aid despite its own decrepit state, Kuwait, Afghanistan, Yemen, Iran and Saudi Arabia. So that's what the world map looks like right now in terms of which countries are supporting Israel and which ones are supporting the other side. Let's go across now and get a word in from India today. Is Rajesh Pawar joining us live from Tel Aviv, the capital of Israel. Rajesh, good to see you. President Biden arrives in Tel Aviv tomorrow. Rajesh, the war machine is fully ready for what has been expected for a while to be a ground invasion or a ground operation in Gaza. The Biden administration has asked Israel not to do so. What is the sense you're getting? How is this going to play out?
Shiv, first of all, good to be with you again after a long time. It feels good. And with regards to the overall situation, look, there are a lot of factors in play right here. There's build-up around Gaza. Israel was ready to go in for a ground offensive about 4 days back. But that ground offensive, which seemed to be imminent, has not come through. There are various factors to that. Hezbollah, which was supposed to have intervened on the side of Hamas from Lebanese side, has not really done so. They have bombarded. There was a little bit of artillery exchange, but that was nothing major as such as of now. So everything hinges around this visit of President Biden tomorrow and what he says. In my view, this is probably a visit to give a clear message to Iran that America is with Israel, and in case Iran intervenes in any way, directly or through Hezbollah or in any way through a proxy war, then America will intervene. Secondly, I think America is also trying to give a message that somehow this whole thing should be solved diplomatically, but this is just a pause so that the hostages which are still held by Hamas can somehow be returned back to Israel. But this war will not stop at that. This will escalate. It's just a matter of time how it goes. Will it be just Hamas or will Hezbollah and Iran will also get involved? Time will tell. Sure.
And Rajesh, Biden's priority, it appears, is going to be to ensure this does not become a wider conflict, because that will mean the US will, be forced to get embroiled. So the picture you're painting is very correct. That is the real dilemma for the United States right now, to contain this situation to just Israel and Gaza. But is that going to happen?
Look, Shiv, these things are very complicated. What appears on the surface is normally not true.
Yeah.
What you see is normally not the aim. The wires are intertwined between Ukraine and Israel and Iran and Russia. Everything is connected. Today, a motion moved by Russia in the United Nations Security Council has fallen. They want to do a ceasefire. And a ceasefire, that is what Israel does not want. That is what the US does not want, because any kind of ceasefire will give time to Hamas to regroup, which Israel does not want. But at the same time, Israel wants the hostages back. So it's quite a delicate situation. And I think the whole game is being played right now. So somehow, through diplomatic pressure, through intermediaries sitting in Qatar or in Iran, the hostages are taken back. And after that, I think Israel will go whole hog in Hamas, in Hamas-held area in Gaza. And I think American troops will be a deterrence for Hezbollah, so that two-front war is not open for Israel. Shiv.
Okay. Thanks very much, Rajesh. Thanks very much for staying with us on that story. I'll get back to you on this. Stay safe. Rajesh in Tel Aviv, he's going to be reporting from the front line very soon. Now, a ground assault on Gaza has appeared imminent for days now, non-stop, as Israel's defense forces, as we've been showing you in our first-hand reports, have been mobilizing in a historic manner. Tanks, artillery, armored fighting vehicles, gunnery columns, they're all massing near the Gaza front line. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says victory in Gaza will take time. What does that mean? And what does it look like nearly 2 weeks into this fight? Take a look.
The Israel-Palestine war has entered day 11. With every passing day, the ground assault on Gaza appears more imminent. Israeli Defense Force are mobilizing tanks and artillery near the Gaza border. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed a total annihilation of Hamas.
Our goal is victory, a crushing victory over Hamas. toppling its rule and removing its threat to the state of Israel once and for all. The conditions for victory, unity and determination. The people are united, the army is united, and the country's leadership is united. So is the national emergency government that we established, and it's good that it was established.
Support continues to pour in for Israel. Their closest ally, America, has vowed support to them, with the US President Biden all set to touch down in Tel Aviv on Wednesday.
The President will hear from Israel what it needs to defend its people as we continue to work with Congress to meet those needs. President Biden will underscore our crystal clear message to any actor, state or non-state, trying to take advantage of this crisis to attack Israel. Don't. To that end, he's deployed 2 aircraft carrier groups and other military assets to the region.
Israel is leaving nothing to chance, beefing up their manpower to wipe out Hamas in Gaza.
Israel's operations against the top Hamas leadership. It's to neutralize the leadership, financial bases and weapons manufacturing facilities. Intelligence-based operations continue to be mounted, and the drones, you can hear the drones, you can hear the artillery going off almost every couple of minutes. The drones keep a sight on where the rocket launch sites are and neutralize them the moment they spot a rocket being launched.
Israeli citizens are united in the war against Hamas. It's not just the soldiers, but every ordinary Israeli who is doing their bit to help in this fight against terror.
These are either reservists or even civilians here in Israel who've come to the front lines. They've come to the front lines. They're giving food, water, Coca-Cola, clothes for women soldiers, sanitary pads, tissue papers, other clothes that they may require.
India?
I'm from India. So
take care of yourself.
Thank you.
From India, so thanks a lot for that.
Not at all, not at all. So all these people in their big cars, in their Porsches, in their BMWs, in their Mercedes, in their Volkswagen, they've all come forward to be a part of Israel's effort to fight Hamas terror.
In a major victory for Israeli forces, a top Hamas official, Osama Mazini, who allegedly plotted the attacks on Israel, has been neutralized. As the Gaza Strip is pounded by airstrikes, so is Israel. Hamas hasn't stopped its offensive, firing rockets directly at capital Tel Aviv.
And this is from my hotel window, and you can hear the air raid sirens and people running to take shelter. It's totally deserted. Look at the streets, everything. It's the center of Tel Aviv, and you can see not a single soul on the roads, nowhere. It's just 9 p.m. The streets used to be crowded, full of people at this time of the day. But right now, because of this air raid siren, look at this, everything is totally empty.
After Israeli ordered Gazans to move out to the south, Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Shatayyeh warned against displacing the people in the Gaza Strip and creating a new catastrophe.
The cabinet warns against the military measure aimed at displacing our people in the Gaza Strip. We affirm that our people will not abandon their land and will not migrate from it, no matter how big the sacrifices are. Our people are capable of confronting and thwarting such schemes, just as they have thwarted numerous liquidation and settlement projects throughout the past decades of struggle.
This is going to be a long-drawn conflict, and Israel this time has vowed they won't stop till every Hamas terrorist and backer is eliminated. With Gaurav Sawant and Rajesh Pawar in Israel, Bureau Report, India Today.
Let me bring in India Today's Gaurav Sawant as well, who's been leading our coverage in Israel and the front lines of Gaza. Big day tomorrow, Gaurav. President Biden arriving. big expectations as well, given everything that you've been reporting over the last few days about the massing of forces and preparations for a ground operation into Gaza, which is something President Biden has actually cautioned Israel against. Where do things stand from your perspective?
So as far as Israel is concerned, their operations will continue. Intelligence-based operations against Hamas terrorists.
Gaurav, we've lost that link with you, and it's a little disturbed. I'm going to try and re-establish that with you so we can hear you better. Our viewers need to hear you, so I'll let you go for the moment. I'll come right back to you after we fix that up. Very, very rapidly developing story. I want to take you straight to ground zero once again, where India Today's Gaurav is reporting on the mobilization very close to the Gaza Strip front line. Gaurav, over to you. What are you seeing?
Shiv, right now we are at the front lines of Israel's war on Hamas terror. Right behind me, you see this Markava tank that's actually gearing up for movement. And this isn't just one tank that's gearing up for movement behind me. So just look all around me. That's another tank there. Those are armored personnel carriers. And Shiv, all of them here have been deployed for operations. And if you just look ahead, Shiv, you will be able to see cloud plumes of smoke rising, because that is where Israel's artillery is pounding the Gaza Strip. So even ahead of US President Joe Biden's visit to this place, the tanks are all prepared. The armored personnel carriers are all prepared. And Shiv, right now we are at Kibbutz Be'eri. You'd recall Kibbutz Be'eri was one of the worst impacted areas because we are right next to the fence. This is where the fence is. This is where you can see the fence there, and you can also see Israeli soldiers move forward towards the fence. So this is how close India today right now is to the Israel's war on Hamas. Tanks lined up, armored personnel carriers lined up, and troops lined up, all for that operation against the Hamas. Now, the psychological warfare that's being waged by Hamas, releasing pictures of a hostage. Israel says the responsibility of keeping hostages safe is that of the Hamas. The people who've been killed, again, it's for Hamas to explain that. But Israel will continue to punish Hamas terrorists and ensure that places like Kibbutz Be'eri and Kfar Aza, where we are never held either to ransom or innocents killed in Hamas terror attacks. Shiv.
That's a first-hand view of the Israeli war machine, a very small part of it that Gaurav is looking at. And all that armored might you see behind Gaurav is massed along the entire frontier with Gaza. So you can imagine how much tank strength has been deployed for this expected ground operation into Gaza. Gaurav, as always, please stay safe. We'll continue to connect with you and report from the ground. The big story today, ahead of the President of the United States' arrival in Israel tomorrow, was the release by Hamas of a disturbing video. It's the first video of an Israeli hostage, 21-year-old Mia Shem, who was captured alive by Hamas from that music festival, that rave party, remember that? In which 260 Israelis were killed. Mia Shem was captured alive, and she's now become the face of the hostage crisis that still looms large over Israel. Take a look at this report.
21-year-old French-Israeli by nationality. Mia Shem disappeared from the music festival where 260 people were killed when it came under Hamas attack on October 7th. Nine days later, the Palestinian militant group released her 60-second video. In the footage, an unidentified worker is seen treating Shem's injured arm. In another clip broadcast on Hamas's Telegram channel, Shem speaks directly to the camera in Hebrew. She says she's in Gaza, that she's being looked after. Her arm was operated on for 3 hours at a hospital, and that she wants to go home. Her mother shared her anguish and issued a fervent appeal for her release.
I'm begging the world to bring my baby back home. This is a crime against humanity, and we should all gather and stop this terror and bring everybody back home.
In a separate communication, Hamas claimed to be holding 200 to 250 people as hostages in Gaza. In his televised statement, a Hamas spokesperson said the non-Israeli captive will be released when conditions are ripe. According to the militant group, at least 22 hostages have been killed in Israeli airstrikes on Gaza. With Hamas showing their capability in asymmetric warfare and avoiding digital trail in their communications, Israel is faced with what probably is the toughest hostage crisis. It has a mixed recording in dealing with such situations. Israel set up a secret force in 1957. The unit shot to fame in 1976. With its raid on Entebbe to rescue hostages from a hijacked plane at a Ugandan airport. In 2011 though, Israel made big concessions to win freedom of one Israeli soldier in Hamas custody. It freed more than 1,000 Palestinian prisoners for the exchange. And that batch of freedom prisoners included the current Hamas leader in Gaza, Yahya Sinwar, one of the masterminds of the October 7th carnage. In the present situation, Israel has been quick to set up a hostage situation room to collate everything about people in Hamas's captivity.
Israel says the responsibility of keeping those hostages safe and out of harm's way is Hamas leadership's responsibility. They're also saying information that 20 to 22 hostages were killed in an Israeli airstrike again is psychological warfare by Hamas, because Hamas leadership had said that they would execute one hostage a day on live TV in case Israel continued to carry out airstrike. Gaurav Sawant in Sderot near the Gaza Strip in southern Israel for India Today.
150 hostages from Israel known to be in Hamas captivity. The face of one of them now revealed in a video released by the Hamas terrorist group. It's a video of 21-year-old Mia Shem. It's a video very much like what terrorist groups release about hostages in the past, but there's a lot in this video that can be revealed once you speak to experts and those with a trained eye. So I want to break down for you some of the things that we can decipher from this video. Whether that information helps the negotiators or Israel or not is a different issue altogether, but here are some of the things that are not immediately obvious. Number one, in this particular video, and it's a video that starts with a logo of Hamas, and this is point number one that the hostage video tells us. Number one, it's in a completely closed room, no windows, no doors, no source of light or anything, obviously showing that the Hamas is careful not for there to be any frame that can perhaps reveal what is outside and therefore reveal what the location of Mia Shem, the hostage being held captive, is. Next. The next point that this video reveals, that experts believe, speaks out, is, of course, that Hamas doctor and cameraman appear to be the only two people in this room. If you look at Mia's eyes, her eyes are closed, or almost closed as she looks front, but she only looks to the side momentarily, indicating that the doctor, the Hamas doctor dressing her arm, and the person filming, probably with a mobile phone, are likely the only two people in that particular room. How useful that information is, once again, is difficult to say. Next. Point number three that experts believe can be deciphered from this video is that obviously her right arm is injured. No other injuries are visible on Mia Shem, even though her right arm is completely bandaged. But that could also be because her entire body is covered. But it's probably safe to assume that there are no other serious injuries. Her arm injury is the only one, at least that's the one that's visible. Next, very important now is this medical instrument. It's called an external device. Now this clearly proves that Mia Shem has suffered some kind of a fracture. Where did she suffer it? How did she suffer it? You can see a big scar across her arm where, as she said, she was operated upon for a broken bone, it looks like. But that is an external device on her humerus. This is the humerus bone, which is this part of the arm that has that external device, which is a pretty common orthopedic device for fractures of this kind. So she's clearly suffered a fracture. Next point, point number 5 from this video is that there's a cut in the video, and then you can see the camera person has moved to another location where he's filming her from just a little bit closer, and she flinches and appears to be moving her head away from the camera. Obviously, in some kind of fear and discomfort, she flinches and turns away from her captors, also suggesting my first point is that the doctor and the camera person are the only two people in the room. Next point, point number 6 that you can look at from this is Mia appears to obey and look directly into the camera for a moment. Remember, very importantly, there's no audio in this video. There's no sound until she begins speaking, which you'll see in just a moment. But she looks momentarily at the camera, which seems to indicate that she's getting some kind of instruction and she's being filmed from very close. Next point, point number 7 in this is that this is the video. Take a look at this, and this has become one of the most telling images of this video. She looks to her left momentarily in what appears to be a different room. There are 2 videos in which this appears to have been shot. The first video was her on a sofa bed in a different room. Here the background appears to be quite different. Another part of the room where this particular bedding is not visible. She appears to be looking to her left for a moment. The sofa bed and blanket are the only items visible here. No other objects in this room are visible whatsoever. So either the same room or 2 rooms have been used in this particular video. Now I want to list some of the unanswered questions, viewer, because a 1 minute 27-second video released by Hamas tells us a lot, like I've just told you, but there are also many unanswered questions. What is Mia Shem's precise location in Gaza? The Hamas terrorists have managed to mask that entirely from the expert eye. Is Mia Shem at risk in Israeli airstrikes? Quite possibly, because nobody knows what her precise location actually is. Are all Israeli hostages alive in Gaza? There are said to be 150 plus hostages. Are they all alive? Are all their injuries similar to Mia's? Could they all be in critical condition in some way or the other? Has Hamas distributed hostages around Gaza? Terrorist groups tend to do this. They distribute hostages around, therefore making it difficult for a country like Israel to conduct accurate airstrikes without endangering the lives of hostages. Will Israel negotiate with Hamas for hostages? Israel is world famous for having a no negotiation policy as far as hostages is concerned, but there have been occasions in the past where prisoner exchanges for hostages have in fact taken place. What will Hamas do if airstrikes don't stop? That has been their condition for the release of hostages, but the airstrikes have not stopped so far. So what's going to happen to people like Mia and others? Are Qatar, Iran, Turkey negotiating a hostage exchange? Will that be successful is another question. And will Israel at any point of time consider releasing Palestinian prisoners in exchange for these hostages? Because there are some reports that suggest an exchange has been proposed, or at least is being mediated by countries like Iran and Qatar. Okay, now while preparations for a ground invasion of Gaza are on, the Israel military calls Yahya Sinwar the hardline leader of Hamas in Gaza. Remember, the leadership is largely scattered in countries like Iran and Qatar, but Yahya Sinwar is still apparently in Gaza. According to top officers, he is the top target for tens of thousands of Israeli troops poised to invade the coastal enclave and destroy any remnants of the Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Long considered a brutal enforcer within Hamas and an implacable enemy of Israel, Sinwar served over 2 decades in Israeli jails before being released, like I said, in a 2011 prisoner swap. After his release, he was chosen to lead Hamas in Gaza and set about consolidating his power. According to the Israeli military, Sinwar is the mastermind behind the October 7th attack in Israel. The attack by Hamas killed more than 1,300 Israelis. Also, he's believed to have been behind the 2015 detention, torture and killing of a Hamas commander, Mahmoud, who was accused of embezzlement and moral crimes amid suspicions of gay sex as well. As a reminder, many of Hamas's top leaders have fled Gaza. They left long before the attack even happened for obvious reasons, leaving underlings, cadres, terrorists to do the fighting in Gaza itself. But here's what we understand about the actual leadership of the Hamas. Ismail Haniyeh is the chairman. He sits in a VIP hotel penthouse in Qatar. Saleh al-Aruri is deputy chairman. His location is understood to be Egypt or Gaza. Yahya Sinwar, the man we just spoke about, his location is unknown, the man behind the actual attack. Mahmoud al-Zahar is the Hamas co-founder. His location is said to be Lebanon, where he has been for a very long time. Then you've got Mohammed the Guest Deif, the military wing chief of the Hamas, one of the most feared characters in this fearsome terrorist organization chart, the man behind the Al-Qassam brigades, the military terrorist wing of the Hamas. He's the man behind it. His location is also unknown and he's not been killed yet. Marwan Issa is said to be in the West Bank. Abu Ubaidah of the Al-Qassam brigade spokesperson, location also unknown but believed to possibly be in Gaza. Fauzi Barhum is the chief spokesperson of the Hamas. You see him in many videos. His location is also unknown, could be in Gaza. There were some reports that he's been killed, none of it confirmed. Ziad al-Nikala is leader of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. His location is said to be Lebanon or Syria. Some said that he could even be in the West Bank. The intelligence minister of Israel has just broken their silence and spoken. Okay, the Israel Prime Minister's spokesperson has just spoken to India today in a big exclusive on the current situation. Let's listen in.
I want to go across live and exclusive at this time to Tel Aviv, where we're joined by Ilon Levy, spokesperson in the office of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel. Mr. Levy, thank you very much for joining us on India today. I want to start by getting you to give our viewers a sense of how you see this war 10 days on from Israel's perspective. How do you think this offensive is shaping up so far?
Israel is a country that is still trying to identify the human remains left behind by the October 7th massacre, a brutal ISIS-style terror attack with a death toll of 1,300 people and rising, nearly 4,000 people injured, 199 Israelis in captivity, hostages inside the Gaza Strip. Many of the remains burned beyond recognition by the Hamas death squads that entered Israel last Saturday and beheaded, butchered, burned, shot everyone they saw. Now, Israel has been very clear about what its goals are for the next stage of the operation. This isn't another round of fighting in which Israel is going to degrade Hamas or deter the Hamas terror organization. This is a war that Israel was forced into, a war we didn't want, a war we didn't expect, but a war that we're going to win, and a war that we are going to win by destroying Hamas, so that this terrorist organization, after its ISIS-like atrocities that we saw just 10 days ago, can never, ever cause any harm to Israeli civilians and citizens ever again.
Now, American President Joe Biden comes to Tel Aviv likely Wednesday. We also know that today your boss, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, spoke to Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, for the first time. Could you give us a sense of your expectation from the American president's visit and how that call with the Russian president went?
Israel expects the full support of the international community for this war, a war, again, we didn't want, a war we were forced into. but this war to destroy Hamas. And we're heartened that so many international leaders have understood what a shocking atrocity this was, including from India, and we're very grateful for India's support, have said that Israel has not only a right, but a duty to defend itself. President Biden has been very clear about that. He's said that if such an attack happened to the United States, he would expect its own response to be swift, overwhelming, and decisive. And that is exactly what Israel is going to do.
Is Israel concerned about this conflict expanding and becoming a three-way fight against Israel? Are you anticipating that the Hezbollah operating in southern Lebanon is likely to get involved on the side of the Hamas, especially as you go into Gaza? How are you reading the developments in Syria? Is Prime Minister Netanyahu concerned about this becoming a three-frontal attack?
It's very important, first of all, that you're covering this from a global and regional perspective. This is a conflict not only against the brutal terrorists of Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Israel has also come under attack from Hezbollah, Hamas's twin sister, also sponsored by the Iranian regime up in the north. And Israel has been very clear. Israel doesn't want to have to fight on two fronts, but if we're forced to do that, we will fight on both fronts, and we will win.
Iran's foreign ministry has put out a statement saying that if the 200 hostages who are being held in the Gaza Strip are released, then the airstrikes on the Gaza Strip should stop, asking the Israel Defense Forces, stop your airstrikes, and that Hamas, which has 200 hostages, is willing to release those hostages.
Israel's message is very clear. We demand the immediate and unconditional return of our hostages. No ifs, no buts. There is no excuse for invading a village with thermobaric weapons, stripping babies away from their bed, and abducting them into some godforsaken tunnel inside the Gaza Strip. Their place is back here, in the loving embrace of their families, and we demand their immediate and unconditional return.